Okay, today we're gonna be making my special salsa, and we used to buy a lot of salsa from the store, but now we make them just because we can make it taste just like what we want it to be. So as you can see, we have some tomatoes, some bell peppers, red, green, and orange ones, cilantros, and of course red onions, and regular yellow onions. Red onions are great just because they're very, very strong and tasty, but also they can be really strong. The yellow onions are for sweetness, and then of course some garlic and some jalapenos. I buy the big ones because I don't really want them to be super hot. I want them to be just mild. Okay, and we have our ingredients: garlic powder, of course. We're gonna use a little bit of paprika, quite a bit of it actually, and some black peppers, ground. Some people use them coarse; those are not so bad. And of course, some salt. These are a little bit more of a rocky salt; they're not fine grain, and some corn syrup. Some people use maple syrup. Perfectly fine, whichever way that you want to do it. But we also use mirin sauce. Now, this is not something that you see all the time. It's a Japanese ingredient. We use them for our salsa just because of the taste that it provides, and some regular white vinegar. Okay. Now, with that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and just kind of chop these things up, dice them up real fine. But not like powdered or anything, but nicely diced up in a large container so that we can at least have them in good bite size when we dip the chips inside it. All right, we're gonna go ahead and start chopping them up. Make sure your blade is sharp, because tomato, you don't want to crush them up or pound on them. You want the blade to slice right through them, so make sure that they're sharpened. Now we're just gonna go ahead and slice this up and set them aside and get them all ready to go. Now, with that said, once I start chopping, I normally take out the back end of it where the stem was, to make sure it's not added onto our mixture. Now, as you can see, we're dicing them up, and they're nicely cubed up pieces so that they're not too big, they're not too chunky, and by the time everything else gets cut up, everything would be very symmetrical to one another. So we're just gonna go ahead and do that to all of the tomatoes first. It's important to get the tomatoes out of the way just because they are normally the largest percentage of the salsa, but also you want the juice to come out of them as quickly as possible. A little bit later, we're gonna add a little bit of tomato sauce just to kind of get that saucy salsa going. It's the same process that we're gonna do with the bell peppers. I tend to use multicolor ones just because I like a salsa that has a lot of different colors into them. I don't want them to be all just red, as if you just made out of tomato sauce or anything. So anything that I can basically put in there that will bring out the color, I tend to do that. So in this case, bell peppers were on sale that day, so I got the yellow, red, orange ones, and of course the green ones. Now, do you have to use these different ones? Absolutely not. You can use whatever it is that you want. Now, we're just gonna go ahead and take the back side of it. As much as possible, we're gonna go ahead and take the white film inside it, just so that it's nice and clean. And it's the same process. We're gonna go ahead and slice this up fine, and then we're gonna go ahead and cross chop it, creating those diced texture as well, and of course shapes, so that everything inside the bowl will be somewhat symmetrical. Does it have to be? Absolutely not. Can you blend these together? Yes, you can. You just have to accept the fact that when you dip your chips inside, it's just gonna be gooey and watery instead of chunks of salsa. Okay, now that we have everything all diced up in a large bowl, we should have all of the tomatoes in there, some of the red bell peppers, and of course the green peppers, and these orange bell peppers. And of course, the jalapenos are in there as well. And again, you can put as much jalapenos as you want, as hot as you want it to be, but I tend to try to make it mild. The cilantro, I love cilantro, so I tend to put a lot of cilantro in a lot of the things that I make that actually can use it. But in the same thing, I'm gonna finely chop this as much as I can, and of course mix it into the bowl. But this is an entire bunch of cilantro, and some people would want to put only a few of them in there. Whatever the case may be, it's your taste. Remember, a recipe is only as good as you think. Now on the jalapenos, be very, very careful with this stuff, okay? I slice them in the middle, and I'll find either a spoon, a knife, whatever the case may be, and I'm gonna try my best to remove the seeds. Now, a lot of people won't remove the seeds because they like spicy, spicy, spicy stuff. For me, I really, I enjoy spicy things, but there are times where I really don't want to. Okay, now moving on to one of the last things that I tend to do, the onions. Why is this? Is because everyone knows when you chop up onions, you tend to cry, okay? And you don't really want to do that too early on, just because you have to be able to see a lot of these things, especially when you have a very sharp knife in your hands. You want to make sure that you know where your fingers are at all times. So I tend to, well, if I know that I'm going to chop up a lot of onions, I tend to save them for last. And of course, just to kind of avoid all of that mess. Also, there is a trick to this. If you, while you're chopping up onions, and of course the sauce is coming out of the onions, the liquid's coming out of the onions, it's important that you wipe the blade off as you're chopping. And also, if you don't want to wipe them, you can actually just rinse them. What does the rinsing the blade do? It actually takes away that gooey film that or sauce that comes out of the onions. That's actually what makes you cry or tear up. Okay, so you'll notice a couple of times that I'll start chopping up some onions and then I'll rinse the blade. And this is something I learned from a lot of the chefs that I used to work with, that I don't really want to be crying while I'm making some food. Now that we have everything chopped up, diced up, we're gonna go ahead and season it. We have our bell peppers in here, onions, red and green, yellow bell pepper with the tomatoes underneath it, and of course the cilantro. First, we're gonna add some salt. We're gonna use about 2 tablespoons of salt. This is sea salt, so it's not as salty as some other types of salt out there, but I like using natural sea salt. The next thing that we're gonna go ahead and put is going to be some black pepper. We're gonna put about a tablespoon of black pepper. Now I know it sounds a lot, but this is a big giant ball, as you saw when we chopped it all up. Next, we're gonna go ahead and put paprika. Paprika just basically brings the taste and the flavor out of the salsa, and it also adds to the color as well. So we're gonna go ahead and put about a tablespoon and a half of paprika, and then of course garlic. You can't really go wrong with garlic. You can put as much as you want. In this situation, we're gonna put about a tablespoon of garlic and a little bit more later, just depending on the taste. And then of course my special ingredient, mirin. It's a Japanese flavoring sauce. You don't normally see this in salsa or any other cuisine. Mirin pretty much is a nice addition to bringing the subtlety of the flavors out. And I'm also putting some regular white vinegar to the sauce, basically bringing that vinegar taste up, allowing the sauce and the tomatoes and the other ingredients to ferment and come through the taste. Now this is corn syrup. You can use maple syrup if you want. Some people use sugar, of course, but we use corn syrup, and a little bit later you'll see that I'll add some sugar in it as well. Now, how much of this do you put? I typically put maybe about 1/8 or maybe 4 tablespoons of it. Okay, the sugar just allows it to last a little bit longer. Just remember that sugar, salt, and of course vinegar are all preservatives, and with this much salsa we're going to want to make sure that this lasts for a while, unless you're serving it at a party and it's all gone after 1 or 2 days. But since we're going to go ahead and save this, we want to make sure that we try to make it last long. So again, vinegar, salt, soy sauce, sugar, they're all preservatives. So now that we've got all of it done, we're gonna go ahead and try to blend all of the now before we start blending, we're gonna go ahead and try to put some sauce in this. Notice that the sauce from tomatoes probably came out a little bit now, but it's still not enough. We want to add some more, so we're gonna go ahead and add 2 cans of tomato sauce in the mix. Also adding a little bit of sugar in there, just because the corn syrup earlier, it may not have been enough. You normally want to, like I said, add about maybe a quarter cup of it, but there was not enough in there, so I added a little bit of sugar to compensate for the missing sweetness. Now we're gonna go ahead and give this a really good mix. Just mix it for maybe about 3 to 5 minutes. Know that when you're mixing this, what you're doing also is allowing the sauce to come out of, or the juices to come out of the ingredients. And you know, the more juice that comes out, the better it's going to be, just because obviously you don't want it to be all chunky. You want some sauce in there like a normal salsa. So just mix it for a few minutes, anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes, and then you're gonna let it sit for about an hour and a half, so that you can kind of basically wait until it's all complete. Mix it throughout the process also, but like I said, about an hour and a half before you start jarring them. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna jar them, just because there's no way that we can eat all of this in one sitting. So through time, I've collected a lot of empty salsa containers, or some other containers that you have around the house, or if you actually just bought them, that's fine. So we're gonna go ahead and just fill these up to the rim, so that least amount of air is inside the containers. And air is bad when you're talking about preserving something. Now that we have them all jarred up, I've managed to basically fill up 3 large jars and about 3/4 of the 4th jar. We're gonna go ahead and kind of just make sure that everything still tastes exactly the way that we wanted it to. Obviously, I'm pretty sure it does, just because we tasted it before, but you're gonna want to go ahead and have a taste test right afterwards, just to make sure everything is nice and neat. Just remember, try to fill it up to the rim, because having extra air inside these jars is not a good thing if you want to preserve them long. Remember, there's tomatoes in there. Tomatoes spoil fast, and air allows that to go even faster. So remove as much air, and of course, don't double dip. Okay, so enjoy. Hopefully this was useful for you, and then if you have any questions, write on the comments of what you want me to make next, and I will see you next time.